and his trial began on Yud Tes Kislev. And the verdict came on Yud Tes, and it was executed the day before I started the Tavis. Who? Laura?
How do you know that? Wow.
There's a lot of Ruach HaKodesh in this room. Oh boy. Better be careful. Hey, Tavis is a Chassidish yontiv also. Okay, so in honor of Yud Tes Kislev, we should see the end of this war and miracles happening like I've never seen before. We'll start with the Kapitel Tilim. Lam Natseach Mizmer LeDavid. Yancha Adonai b'yom tzara yisagevcha shem Elohei Yaakov. Yishlach ezecha mikodesh u'mitzir yisadeka. Yizkar kol nechasecha v'yiloscha yidash nesela. Itein lechocha levecha v'chol atzoscha yimali. V'rana b'shuasecha u'v'shem Eloheinu nidger. Yimali Adonai kol mashalesecha. Ata yodaiti ki Yeshia Adonai Mashiach. Yanei u'mishmei kodesh. Gvureis Yesha Yemina, Eile Barechev, Veile Basusim. Anachnu b'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskin. Heima Korav V'Nafogu. V'anachnu Kamnu V'Naseidah. Adonai Yeshia Amelech Yaneinu V'Yem Kareim. Baruch atah Adonai Shachanu. We do have coins here, so. I saw fundraising keeping up with us, you know.
Yes.
Stories, okay, good.
I was there.
Yeah, I saw you.
Electronically.
I just saw your name.
Yep. Okay.
So we came to the point in the story where the Alter Rebbe was released from jail. And then he was released from the house of this Nagid, who was there for 3 hours. And actually, the plan that they had, like everything else, they had to undermine Chassidus and to destroy Chassidus, was really something that backfired on them. As a result of this whole story, actually thousands of people became Chassidim. In other words, even though there were many Yidden who were against Chassidus, but nobody would have even thought to go as far as informing a false accusation to the Russian government to Chas v'Sholom execute the Alter Rebbe. And therefore, they realized that there's a lot of people involved that are just not the Shem Shemayim, they're not really sincere. They just want machlokes, and these are people that you can't trust what they say and what they do. And like I mentioned in class, how they came to the Bezdin and they testified things that were not even true. And on that basis, the Bezdin came out against Chassidim. But once they saw that they went that far, they actually realized that there's something very wrong. And in fact, one of the people, as I told you, the person who was the top person who was leading the whole fight against Chassidim was the Goin of Vilna Goin. He had a student whose name was Reb Chaim Volozhiner. And he was probably one of his greatest students. And he was also against him. But after this incident, when they went and they arrested the Alter Rebbe, he pulled back and he said he's never getting involved with all the activities of opposing Chassidus. And his family is a line of rabbis who are, since then, each one in his generation was a great rabbi in the Lithuanian world, up to recently. It's the name of the family is Soloveitchik. There was a Chaim Soloveitchik, Yisrael Soloveitchik, and they were always close and friendly to Chassidim. And in fact, there was a Rabbi Soloveitchik who lived in Chicago, also a head Rosh Yeshiva. So he said it's an accepted thing in their family that there were many rabbis in that generation who were brilliant Geonim. They were giants and geniuses in Torah, and they're the ones who signed all sorts of declarations and excommunications against the Alter Rebbe. And today we don't know who they are, the grandchildren, descendants, they just disappeared. These are such giants, we'd expect their children or descendants to also be rabbis and scholars and Rosh Hashivas. One of the only ones from that time that we know today that are still known Torah scholars and Torah leaders of the Soloveitchik family. And they attribute it to the fact that ultimately they pulled out from the Machlekes against the Alter Rebbe. Now, this day, it's an interesting thing that Yud Tes Kislev is very interesting in a sefer called Shailus Etchulis Min Hashamayim. It means responsa from heaven. What does that mean? There's a sefer that was written by one of the early commentators, one of the Bali Tosfos. You know, in Gemara, there's Rashi and there's Tosfos. The yeshiva, which was called Tosfos, they were the ones who lived about 700 years ago, primarily in France. So one of these rabbis wrote a sefer, and it's called Responsa from Heaven. What does that mean? He went to sleep at night, wrote out a question on a blank piece of paper. When he woke up in the morning, there was an answer. You can try it, see what happens. And he put together the whole sefer with all the questions and the answers. Most of the answers that came from Shemayim were without a date, just an answer. A few have dates. One of them, the date is Yud Tes Kislev, and next to those words it says Yoim Besura, which means it's a day of good news. But if you go back in history, there's nothing that we know on Yud Tes Kislev that's a day of good news, except for the Yud Tes Kislev that we're celebrating now. That itself is a very interesting thing to note. And let me see. There's a few other things that I wanted to bring out. I told you the story about how Hasidim understood why the Alter Rebbe wanted the Tanya to be ready on Chof Kislev, and it had to do with the fact that the Alter Rebbe was arrested, and even though he was arrested, he ended up in the house of this person. In fact, on the day of today is the 18th of Kislev, so it says that everybody in the Alter Rebbe's family, they were fasting, and of course they were very, very pained and doing everything they possibly can. The person who was the strongest in the family and gave strength to everybody else was the Alter Rebbe's mother. Her name was Rivka, and she was the one that gave everybody strength. But on this day, the Mitzel Rebbe, at one point, fainted, obviously from all the aggravation and from everything. And then she said to him, I promise you, my father told me that that today, I think he said this week or today, he's going out of jail. There still will be a little bit of agmas nefesh, will be a little bit of aggravation, but ultimately everything will be over very soon. So they understood it to me. Today he went out of jail. The aggravation was that he went into the house of the Misnagid. No, I'm mixing up two stories. That's one story. The other story that the Mitzvah Rebbe said that on this day, it was actually Yud Tes Kislev on itself. There was a chassid, his name was Rabbi Shulman Yaakov, and he went to daven for the Amid, and the Mitzvah Rebbe said that the Maggid came to him, to the Mitzvah Rebbe, and he said, your father is going out of jail today, but he's still suffering, but soon that'll be over as well. And there's also another story that's told about a chassid who had a dream. Remember, if you remember in the beginning, I told you there was a chassid that he went out to outside when the rest of the Alter Rebbe, and he saw him being taken into this wagon with soldiers, had open swords, and he was in such shock that he fainted, and they couldn't wake him up until eventually they told him Alter Rebbe is freed, and then he woke up. Anyway, this chassid went back home, and his community, what they did was every day, at the end of it, they would fast every single day. Today we're not into fasting, but then it was. At the end of the day, all the chassidim would come together, and they would have a farbrengen. That day, they came together to have a farbrengen, and this chassid, he used to be a chassid of Rav Mendel of Horodok. That's the Rebbe that went to Israel. And after he went to Israel, he felt that he needed a Rebbe that's here, and he became a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. So he told the chassidim that he had a dream. The Mendel of Horodok told him that on Yud Tes Kislev is the yard side, the Yom Elul of Mazeritch Magid. So all the tzaddikim from that are up there come to the chamber of the Mazeritch Magid to have a farbrengen up there too. They have farbrengens. And the Mazeritch Magid and the Baal Shem Tov, and who was the third one? Maybe the Arizal. They made a bezdin. I might be getting some details wrong, but I think Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was the third one. They made a bezdin, and Mazeritch Magid said to them, my student, he called him Zalman Yud, that's how he called the Alter Rebbe, is in a very grave danger, and they made a bezdin, and they ruled that he has to go out of jail. So when they heard this dream, they all got excited, and they decided, and they knew this was not an ordinary chassid, and if he has a dream like that, it's not an ordinary dream. He said, Rabbi came to him and said, because you were once my student, I'll give you a report of what's going on up there. And they decided to fast anyway until they hear the news. And yes, in those days, things were a little bit different. So they heard the news that Alter Rebbe was freed on Hanukkah, they found out. But until then, they were still going on with the fasting. One of the things that's very big part of the story of Yud Tes Kislev is two things. Number one, there were 10 chassidim. The Alter Rebbe gave a warning that these 10 chassidim should not come to Petersburg during the time that he's arrested. Why? Because he said if they would come to Petersburg, they would burn the place down. What does that mean? It doesn't mean they would light a fire and burn down the jail. It meant that there were such great tzaddikim, these 10 students, that with their davening and their learning and their tillim, whatever they would be doing, then physically the Alter Rebbe would go out of jail miraculously. So what's wrong? The Alter Rebbe didn't want that. This goes together with another story. The other story is that I mentioned before, the Alter Rebbe wrote a letter to Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush. Who was Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush? A grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. On the other hand, there was a point where he was very close with the Alter Rebbe, and then there was a point where he became an opponent of the Alter Rebbe. Why an opponent? Because he was of the opinion the Alter Rebbe is revealing too much Chassidus, more than he should. So one time, the Alter Rebbe and him met, and he said to the Alter, and the Alter Rebbe said to him, "Why are you against me? I had Mesiras Nefesh for your grandfather. You should be thankful to me, not against me." So he said, "Big deal. If I was arrested, I'd give a few puffs with my pipe, burn the place down, and go home." I mean, what he meant to say was, who told you to be there for 53 days? You could have done something which was miraculous, not Apri Teva. I mean, the Rebbeim made miracles that were totally out of the range of Teva. So why couldn't you do something like that and go out? The Alter Rebbe said, no, look at Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu saw that Esau was coming to kill him with 400 men. And these are the words of Alter Rebbe. He said that Yaakov Avinu was able to take his hand, move over his forehead like that, and Yaakov and all the 400 men would have disappeared. What did Yaakov do? He prepared to do things in a derech hateva way. He prepared for war. He prepared by giving him a big gift. And then, of course, he prepared by davening. But he also prepared for war, and he prepared by giving him a gift and separating the camp and making it. And he did things in derech hateva. The Alter Rebbe said he wanted that they should ask him questions. He would give them answers that they, from their perspective and what they understand, would be satisfied And they should say, you can go free, whatever you're doing is perfectly okay, and you're innocent, and we give you the green light. So that's the same thing with these 10 Hasidim. And these 10 Hasidim would come to Petersburg, and through their Avodah, they would burn the place down, which is an interesting thing, because they could have all done whatever they did wherever they are. But apparently, if they would come together as a minion and be in Petersburg and do whatever they're doing, they would succeed in miraculously bringing the Alter Rebbe out of jail. And the Alter Rebbe said, I didn't want that. I wanted things to go through Derech HaTeva. And why is this so important? This goes together with the other story, with the story that Alter Rebbe stopped the boat, and then he asked them, now I want you to stop it, because he wanted it to be stopped from Derech HaTeva. This is one of the key differences between the Alter Rebbe and all other Hasidim. All the other Hasidim, by them, the idea of miracles was very common, and not just miracles, but very open miracles, something which was so explicit that you couldn't even doubt and have any questions, where the rabbis would tell people things that are going to happen in the future, or things that happened in the past that nobody knew, or do things that there's no way that you can even make a mistake and think that al pi teva this thing could happen. The Alter Rebbe also performed miracles, but by him everything was in this sort of hidden way. So there's a letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to our Rebbe. And that letter, the Rebbe is sort of asking the Frierdiker Rebbe that why not perform more open miracles? That's the kind of thing that the Rebbe wrote. Anyway, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe how this is not the way of Chabad. Then he tells the following story, that there was a chassid, there was a mashpia, his name was Rabbi Leib. It says there which city he lived in. And he had students who were learning Chassidus with him. In the same town, there was another group of Chassidim, but not Lubavitcher Chassidim. And there was a young man that belonged to that group. And then somehow he became familiar with Chassidus. He loved what he heard. And slowly but surely he left that group and he became a Chassid with the Alter Rebbe. So every time he would meet with his old friends, they would talk about it, the differences. And the friends would tease him in a way. They would say, you are learning Chassidus. In that sense, we actually envy you. Our Rebbe doesn't allow us to learn Chassidus in depth. But there's one thing we have, you don't have. Our Rebbes perform these open, incredible, unbelievable miracles. The Alter Rebbe, we don't hear such stories. And it came out as if the Alter Rebbe is inferior to the other Rebbes. And it bothered him, but he was sort of embarrassed for himself that it even bothered him. So he didn't share it with anybody, but this would happen often. One time his mashpia calls him in, and he says, I got a letter from the Alter Rebbe, but I don't understand it. And you're the only one that could explain it to me. I couldn't, how could that be? So he tells him, I'll tell you what the Alter Rebbe wrote me. He wrote me in his letter, please be Makara of this student. In other words, show him closeness and share things with him and talk to him and try to ease his pain. Then he finishes off with a word. It's a little bit of a play of words in Chumash. It'll be for you a sign and for others a miracle. And he says, for me, it's a puzzle more than anything else. I don't understand. It's a mystery. What does that mean? And then the chassid broke down and he opened up and he told him that his mind was this thing that the Alter Rebbe does not perform open miracles. So he understood now that the Alter Rebbe is telling his mashpia that he should talk to him and explain to him that the fact there aren't any open miracles is not because the Alter Rebbe was inferior, but because the Alter Rebbe had a different shita, a different approach of how to do things. And in the meantime, it'll be a sign for you, meaning the mashpia, that you have to teach him more to understand what Chabad Chassidus is. And for him, it'll be a miracle. He'll see his miracle that he was waiting for. That the Alter Rebbe, a few hundred miles away, knows exactly what he's thinking. So what is the explanation? The explanation is all of Hasidim and all the Rebbes had one goal in mind. They all had the same sort of mission statement, the same goal, starting from Baal Shem Tov. And that goal is that the time has come that we have to reveal godliness in the world in a more revealed way. The difference was how. So these are the two general paths. But I mentioned the other day that all the Rebbes were different one from the other. There were 120 students, each one had their path. And the Alter Rebbe was different than all the other 119 students, pretty much. In what sense? In the path, how to reveal godliness in the world. We can reveal godliness in the world by the Rebbes and the tzaddikim, the students, the Baal Shem Tov, they all, and the Baal Shem Tov himself revealed godliness two ways. One way was through the miracles that he performed. When you see a miracle, that's godliness revealed. And the second way is through Chassidus. Chassidus is revealing godliness, telling us what's doing in Atzilus and in Bria, the spheres, to understand the spiritual levels. That's revealing godliness. These are two things that were done by the Baal Shem Tov and all the Rebbes afterward. But the difference is, other Rebbes believe that Chassidus is something which has to be taught, but only a little bit and brief, not really go very deep into it. And the Alter Rebbe believed that should be the main venue, the main conduit, how to reveal godliness in this world. And they believe the main way to reveal godliness in the world is through miracles, performing miracles, open miracles in front of people, and that would make them see godliness in a more open way. And even if a person didn't have a miracle, but he hears from his friend and his relative that this and this happened, that will inspire him to love Hashem, to feel godliness, because he's aware of these great miracles. What's the difference? Like everything else, there's got to be an advantage in one over the other, and there's got to be an advantage in the other over the other one. So the advantage in miracles are, ask yourself this question. You're learning a mimer, and you're learning something about Atzilus, Abriya, Yetzirah, which is something about godliness. Even if you get excited, would you compare that to actually experiencing a miracle in your life about something supernatural happening, a bracha from a Rebbe? Can't compare. We see people change their lives after having miracles. It happens all the time. I remember I used to give a class in Manhattan once a week. It was during the winter, and I couldn't get a taxi to go. I used to go back by taxi. I couldn't get a taxi. As soon as they see someone with a beard, oh, they're going to Brooklyn. Taxis don't want to go. But this guy picked us up, and of course, I couldn't tell that he's Jewish, but he starts talking, and he says that for 13 years they had no children. And they went to every single doctor you can think of. He was an Israeli person. They went to Israel doctors, American doctors, nothing really helped. And then someone told him to go to a certain Rebbe, and that Rebbe told him to put pushka somewhere. It's another thing to do. And that year, they had a child. So we asked him who was the Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had no idea who we were. But I'm saying, and after that, he started to get much more involved in Judaism. So this is common, that a miracle happens now during the war. I mean, so many people got close to Yiddishkeit because the miracle that they saw during the war. The things that happened, which were just crazy miracles, and it was clear miracles in front of their eyes. What was that story that long ago, where there was a group of people, actually religious soldiers. No, they weren't religious soldiers, but there was one religious soldier amongst the group. They sat down to eat, and he sat down. He went to daven mincha. So they were facing one direction. He was facing the other direction because he was davening mincha. And as he's davening mincha, he sees a gun sticking out of the hole in the ground, which is a tunnel. And he made them all aware, and they killed him, and their lives were saved. Had he be facing the other direction, like all of them, God forbid, they all could have been gone. And these are the stories that happen constantly. So when a miracle happens, it's much more powerful. There's much more power in a miracle that lifts a person off the ground. It's like a storm comes, a A hurricane just lifts things off the ground. Learning and understanding also inspires a person, but it doesn't have that kind of power like a miracle. But the advantage is that if you're lifted because of learning, it's something which penetrates deep inside. Like the marshal, we always give a piece of paper that's flying. It's flying because the wind is carrying it, but the paper hasn't really internally changed. So other Hasidim, where did they get the inspiration? It was mainly through the miracles of the Rebbe and through their connection to the Rebbe. And they believe the Rebbe is the one who studies Chassidus. He's the one who is on fire with learning and davening. And because we're connected to him, and he's the pilot, and we're on his plane, we go up as well. So there was a story with the Alter Rebbe, that he was once visiting somewhere, and he was with another Chassid, and he points to someone who was davening there. Who is that person? He was a Chassid of another Rebbe. His name was, good morning. What was his name? The name something. Okay. His name was Chaiko Hamadura. He came from a city called Hamadura. And when he was davening, you could see that the person was on fire. So the Chassid said to Alter Rebbe, look, he's on fire. The Alter Rebbe said, not he's on fire, Reb Chaiko is on fire. Basically, this Reb Chaiko would daven every day at certain hours. All those Chassidim, wherever they lived, they had 3,000 Chassidim, they all would daven at the same time. And when they were davening and he was davening, they would be on fire. And because they were connected to their Rebbe. So he said, not he's on fire, but their Rebbe is on fire. I would give a mushal, I would think of it, imagine if there's a fire in the room and there's also a fire in the mirror. So the mirror is on fire, but it's not really on fire. The fire is here. The mirror mirrors that fire. Chas v'shalom, these are humans. So when they were on fire, they were really on fire. But the main fire came not from inside, it came more because it was a reflection and it was an extension of the Rebbe's fire. The Alter Rebbe wanted that every person should create their own fire. It's like we learned in the Maimer Basile Gani that on the Mizbeh there were two fires. One fire that we created, and another fire that fell from Shamayim. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe wanted that whatever is accomplished, whatever is going to happen, has to come through our own avodah. There's a story with the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek was the Alter Rebbe's grandson. And Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe once told him that I want to give you a gift. The gift would be vast knowledge of Torah that you don't have yet. How would he do that? In a miraculous way. Today it's easy. You just transfer it from one computer to the next. So you have a disk that has the whole Shas and all the Mefarshim. I think it has something like 60,000 or 70,000 Torah Sfarim. You put it into a machine. Imagine you can insert that into somebody's brain, which they're planning to do one day, put a chip in your brain, and all of a sudden you have the whole Shas and all the Mefarshim right in your head. So the Alter Rebbe was going to do this in a spiritual way, in a miraculous way. Tzemach Tzedek refused to accept it. And he said the reason is, why did he refuse? Because the Alter Rebbe trained him and taught him that everything you achieve spiritually has to come through your avodah. Otherwise, if it's just given to you, even though it's amazing and it's vast, but it's still not me. When is it me? If I work on it myself, and through my work and through my effort, I achieve it, then it's mine. Then it's pneumius. So this is, in a sense, the difference. When things happen to you in a miraculous way, it's chitzonius. It's very powerful, but it doesn't really penetrate you. And if it comes through learning, through understanding, and through my own effort, then it's pneumius, and that's an internal change within me. There's a story similarly with the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Frierdiker Rebbe said he knew an individual who was an older man, and he said he still remembers when he became bar mitzvah, his grandfather took him to the Tzemach Tzedek for a bracha. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, put his holy hands on my head, and he added, I still have the yarmulke that he put his hands on, and the Tzemach Tzedek gave me a bracha. Before he gave the bracha, my grandfather said to the Rebbe, give him a bracha, Rebbe, please give him a bracha that he should remember everything that he saw in my home, everything that he saw amongst Hasidim, and everything that he sees by the Rebbe. And if he remembers all that, then he'll naturally be a God-fearing Jew, be Yerushalayim. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, and it's over 50 years that my grandfather and my father-in-law and myself are working so hard that Chassidim should not be natural Yerushalayim, but be Yerushalayim that comes through hard labor and hard work. And it's not because Chas v'Shalom anybody wants us to work hard, but the only way that I know that it's a product that I produced is if I work on it. If it comes naturally because everybody around me is a certain way, then yes, I'm going to change, but it's not a real deep change. The only way there could be a deep change is coming from me. So this is one of the sort of cornerstones of Chassidus. And not only that, if you think of it, the Alter Rebbe was the one who was in jail because he was the one who revealed Chassidus, but so many other Rebbes revealed Chassidus. What did I tell you the other day? But Chassidus Chabad was more than anything else. In other words, the Alter Rebbe's Mesiras Nefesh was specifically for this, that we should be able to follow the path of Chabad, and we should be able to find a way that we learn something in Chassidus, and it transforms us internally in a deep way. Now again, we're not like those big Chassidim, but whatever we do, even on our level, we learn something, we understand something. You know, when you girls learn Chassidus here in 1 week, in other Chassidic circles, men with long white beards learn that amount of Chassidus in probably a half a year or something. They're very little, very small pieces of Sefer here and a Sefer there, and they get inspired, and it's a different kind of inspiration. There's one more story that I want to leave off with, because tomorrow we're already having a special schedule of learning. And that is where story we can see what was going on in that time. So I said the headquarters was Vilna, but there were a lot of other cities that are also very big in their opposition against Chassidus. One of them was called Slutsk, and one of them was called Shvin. But there was one specific individual in that city called Shvin, who was actually one of the biggest Torah scholars of the generation. And he was somebody who many years before this story, was very wealthy, and he dedicated himself completely to the war against Chassidim. He and his children and his son-in-laws, his daughter-in-laws, everybody was involved, and he spent a fortune on all the activities that were done to go against the Baal Shem Tov. He was older. And then the Maggid, and he was still alive at the times of the Alter Rebbe. But one of the things that happened to him, not Nebuch, as you will see, is that some of his grandchildren became Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. And they lived in that city, and they would talk to people about Chassidus, and quietly, underground, a lot of people in the town, which was one of the strongest opposition against Chassidus, secretly became Chassidim. And at a certain point, you told the Alter Rebbe, we feel that the people of this town are now ready, that if the Alter Rebbe would come visit and speak, people would be inspired, and more people would become Chassidim. And the Alter Rebbe accepted their invitation. The Alter Rebbe went there, and naturally the Alter Rebbe spoke Chassidus. He also answered questions in Gemara and other things, and it blew people away, and they really saw the Alter Rebbe as a great tzaddik and a great Torah scholar, and more people became Chassidim. He was there for 3 Shabbosim. That's what it says. Parshas Noach, Parshas Lech Lecha, and Parshas Vayera. The last week that he was there, this person's name was Shlomo Raphael. He was what they called a Parish. In those days, we don't see this today, but in those days, there were certain people that were Prushim. What's Prushim? Prushim means people who isolated themselves completely from the community. They sat in shul, they learned the whole day. I guess there must have been different levels, but he was one of those people. They wouldn't even look outside of their Daled Amos, which means when they went home, some of them would tie their eyes with the kerchief. They shouldn't be able to see, and people would lead them home. And the same when they went back. And they went home once a week just for Shabbos. All week they were in the shul. I guess their wife or family member brought them food. They didn't stop learning. All they did was daven and learn and daven and learn. And he lived like that for 50 years. I mean, you're talking about people that were almost like malachim, like angels. And like I said, he was one of the biggest people who opposed the Alter Rebbe. And when he was there that Shabbos, that the Alter Rebbe came, the Alter Rebbe davened in his shul. That's where his grandchildren were. The last 30 years before this, when the Alter Rebbe was there, he stopped all his activities of fighting Chassidim. Nobody knew why. But when it was going on, he was like the main person involved in all the declarations and all the announcements and all the public things they went out against. So that Shabbos, after the davening was over, I think it was, he got up and said he wanted to say a few words. And he said, being that he was in his 90s already, being that I'm an older person, and it's hard for me to speak loud, I'm asking everybody to be quiet. I have something very important to say. So he got up and he said like this. Eschatoy ani masker hayom. It's words from the next week's parsha, where he said, I'm going to mention to you the wrong thing that I did wrong. And he said, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, I was involved with all the other leaders of Torah that came out against the Baal Shem Tov. And I'm standing here in a shul. I'm standing here in front of Hashem. So I want you to know that whatever I did was purely L'Shem Shemayim. God forbid, no other intention, no agendas. I just thought in my mind that I'm fighting a war for Hashem to save Yidden from not being misled. For 7 years, I was standing at the head of this war. The day that I became 70 years old, I was sitting and learning Gemara. I was learning Gemara Menachos, and I fell asleep. And then a face appears to me, and the face that I saw, I didn't recognize. But then the person said, I am the Baal Shem Tov, that you and all the other Torah leaders declared against me an excommunication, which is one of the worst things you can do. And he said to him, did you follow the protocol according to Torah that there has to be chakira v'drisha? Do tshuva. He woke up and he said to himself, he's right. There's a halacha that when you're going to put someone to excommunication, you have to have a special procedure of investigation that you don't have for other things. Only for this, you have to investigate. I mean, there are a few other things. You have to investigate in a very thorough way. And he said to himself, did I ever do that investigation? No. And how did I do it? How did I make this declaration? So I started to investigate. And I found out that the Chassidim are actually people who observe Torah and they observe mitzvahs and they're God-fearing. And when that happened, I pulled back from everything that I did. And he said that, and apparently people wanted to get out of him, why did you stop? He didn't tell them. I don't know why he didn't tell them then. But at this point, he said that's basically what he's holding. And then he said, I am 93 years old today. I'm standing in a shul, and I want to say with a full mouth, openly. And he made a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech. He didn't say Hashem, he said Hashem's name. Shechionu v'kimonu v'giyonu v'zman hazeh. That Hashem gave me the schus, that I should meet the Goyin and Tzaddik, the Alter Rebbe, who brought tens of thousands of people closer to Yiddishkeit. And that schus, Mashiach should come. He spoke very quietly, but this made a commotion in the whole area, in the whole region. After this story, again, hundreds of people became Chassidim. But here we see that the machlekes was all based on lack of knowledge. Like, for example, could you imagine today someone would say you're allowed to burn the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, God forbid, you're allowed to burn the Tanya. People say it's not our path, it's not our way. So how do they do it then? the Alter Rebbe himself? And the answer is it was all based on lack of communication, miscommunication, a lack of, like you said, of investigating and finding out. So this was a big war. When did it actually stop? It went on for the next generation. You see, the Mitzvah Rebbe was also arrested. It stopped in the third generation by the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek generation, the whole machloikas between Chassidim and Misnagdim died down. At that point, the Misnagdim recognized that the Chassidim were really God-fearing people. And of course, the Chassidim saw that the Misnagdim were also God-fearing people, but only being misled. And that's when peace reigned. From then until our generation, where some people made Tchias HaMesim and they woke up to Machlekes again. But for about 100 years, it was totally quiet. Okay, so today is the last day of the Chassidish year, which starts on Yud Tes Kislev. And if you look at the Tanya at the end, the bracha that we give each other is the Shana Teva, the Limud HaChassidus, the Dark HaChassidus, the Kasevus, the Chasevus, it's Rosh Hashanah the Chassidus. We'll explain that tomorrow. You're welcome.
Majeski?